Hey friends, just a quick reminder before we get into today's episode, come join us over on our Patreon. That's where we release bonus episodes every other week, and we've already got over 20 episodes from 2023 that you can download and binge right now for as little as $3 a month. We've covered so many good books there, Haunting Adeline, Chateau, Gothicana, and so many more. That's also where we'll cover any books in a series we continue, so Serpent and Dove, High Mountain Court, Serpent and the Wings of Night. You can continue those series with us on Patreon right now. Finally, as a patron, we let you know what we're going to read every month, so you can read along with us if that's your jam. Anyway, that's all from me. On to today's episode. Specifically the horses, because I just got so fucking tired of the journey. I was like, okay. Jesus Christ. It's a one-day journey. Why is it 9 chapters? It's not, but right. It lasted so fucking long. It reminded me of the chapter in the grapes of wrath of the turtle crossing the road. And they're not even like talking about anything. I'm just like, why are we still on the horses?
Welcome to Your Safe Space, the podcast your partner, friends, parents, whoever thinks is dirty. Don't have time to read books? Want to understand the jokes and the TikToks? We got you, fam. We're the Spice Traders, and we deal in spicy books. I'm Katie, and I need it to make sense.
I'm Liz, and I'm hypercritical. As always, we start every episode with 3 things. The first is a generic trigger warning. You can find specific triggers for this book in our show notes, so please check those out. Also, we do use foul language and talk a lot about sex. If you have sensitivity to any of this, please give this episode a skip.
Secondly, we talk about books. The whole book, nothing but the book, so help me goddess. If you plan to read this book and don't want something spoiled right now, don't listen to this episode.
Lastly, we acknowledge that a good book can hit you at the wrong time. The views expressed in our discussion are our opinion, and we absolutely don't want to diminish the work and the talent of the authors in our community. That said, we have some notes.
So Liz, what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about The Destroyer by Meg Smitherman. This was published in 2022, and it is the first in a series, the Shattered City series. Currently, there are 2 published books. This book is 418 pages long, and that's a longie for us. So this will be part 1, covering chapters 1 through 12. This will be a multiple-parter. Yes. I need to remind myself what the cover looks like. I find that I forget the covers really quickly when I'm reading things on KU because I'm not seeing it. The cover, I mean, the cover's fine. It's black and gold, and it literally just says the title, and there's like some filigree around it. I do think it's a pretty book.
It's very pretty. Yeah, it's certainly not offensive.
It's not offensive. I like the filigree. I like the little like glimmer on the E in Destroyer. And the second one, this book is black with gold and like gray filigree, and the second one is white. And I do like that kind of sinner and saint vibe. Especially because you get Destroyer and Sanctifier, so we still get those vibes. And like, I don't know where that's going yet from where we are in the book, but I do think that they are very pretty books.
Yeah, I don't get a very strong feeling for like the size here, but some of these pictures, like if you just Google search the book, make the book seem like it's really small.
I know. I mean, there's this picture with someone holding it, and it does seem really small, but it's a long book.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's just the form factor or what.
I do like the simplicity. I would much rather have this kind of cover than the Pinterest mood board.
Oh yeah, the bad like
roses,
Photoshop,
crowns. Is bad. Also, when you Google this book, so I Googled The Destroyer book, Meg Smitherman, and there's this picture of who I presume is the author, and it's her holding a chihuahua in her lap, and then a black background, and then a big ass chihuahua head like looming out of the darkness. And it's a whole ass mood, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, that's a vibe.
It's a choice for an author photo, and I like it.
I'm here for that.
I'm not mad about it. So yeah, I don't have that much to say about the cover. Do we have anything else to add before we?
No, not offensive, not spectacular. You know, that nice sweet spot.
I'll take it. So then Katie, kick us off.
All right. So this is part 1. Like Liz mentioned, we're going to be covering chapters 1 through 12. This book will be split into 3 parts. So we're going to save our ratings till the end of the 3rd part, like we usually do when we split it up. We get a prologue in this book, but unfortunately we don't get a map. And the more I read it, the more I really could have used a map.
I really want a map. I was surprised we did not have one. We go a lot of places.
Yeah.
Or not
We
even,
go a
but
lot
like
of places.
I need to know if your main character is an archaeologist, you should have a map.
You should have a map. And we reference a lot of places, and I don't know what those are.
No, especially because we get places with names that are kind of generic, like the Tower or like
Right.
the Forgotten City or whatever it's called. And I'm like, that means nothing to me.
Yep. Or like we know that this takes place in a kingdom, but then we get names of places which I am led to believe based on context clues don't reside also in that kingdom. So are they other kingdoms? Are they cities in other kingdoms? Like there's a lot of context that I'm grasping at straws to try to pick up what's going on.
Yeah. And I have this problem when we have kingdoms specifically. I don't know why, but when I don't have a map, my brain does this thing where like the whole world that I'm in is just this like island with the kingdom and there's nothing else. Maybe that's because I've been playing Zelda, but like you have Hyrule and like the map ends, right? Like there are ends and there's nothing else on the planet, apparently.
Right.
That's the vibe I get when I don't have a map and I don't like it.
Yeah, and for me it's like they're in a white space and they're just kind of moving around, but the like distances and relative like direction are amorphous, so they just kind of are orbiting each other and it's very loosey-goosey. But anyway, we get a prologue, so we're going to start there.
Because we read prologues here.
Because we read prologues on this podcast. And I have to be honest, when I read this prologue, I had a bit of a panic attack because we get a King Alaric. And the reason I had a moment of panic, and I cannot even tell you if this is the right name or what, but this scene presented like the first scene in Rise of a Dark Throne all over again. And I was like, if this is the same thing, I'm gonna lose my shit. I have no reason to think that. I was just triggered.
That's so funny. I don't remember if that's the name, but that's just because I think I blocked out Rise of Dark Throne because it was so bad.
So bad.
So bad. That's very triggering. That's very upsetting. I'm so sorry you had that experience.
Thank you. Thank you for your condolences.
I share them with you.
But so this prologue tells us the story. It's lore, really, of King Alaric II of the kingdom of Navany. He had spent a restless night pacing in his keep in Ordelin by the sea with his advisor Tyrell Aharis close by. And this guy is a soothsayer, so kind of a future seer, magic man, kind of...
That is also Rise of a Dark Throne-y.
Yeah. I'm thinking of Rasputin. He was the Russian guy, right?
Yeah,
that's what I'm kind of picturing for this guy. So we don't know what he was stressed about, but when dawn neared, this king and this advisor ventured into the town down to the docks. When they get there, the king says aloud, quote, "Festra wills it," and for some reason, Teriel, I think I said it wrong the first time, but Teriel kneels and conjures a terrible darkness that engulfs the city for days. When that darkness finally recedes, the city is entirely gone. No survivors, not even buildings. It's leveled, it's charred black earth. And because of this story, this earned Teriel the title of Destroyer.
Which is a wild piece of lore.
It is wild, and I have to share with you, I really hope that Fen is Teriel.
That's what I'm hoping.
Right? But I can't make Fen and Teriel Aharis, like, be congruent.
But I think that's because I don't think we've gone through a whole podcast where one of us doesn't reference Harry Potter. But we have, like, the Tom Marvolo riddle, I am Lord Voldemort, where, like, I need to see the anagram. And
yep,
there's no F in there. That was another problem I had in this book, was that everyone introduced gets a first and last name. I don't need that.
I don't need that. And also, I don't need most of the people we get introduced to.
No, I do not.
Just hard period.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I immediately picked up on in this prologue was the author's use of simple but effective language to describe things. So I picked out this one descriptor of the docks that said, quote, a thick fishy breeze, which I just was so visceral for me.
It was for me too. I was like, ooh, I feel that. Okay.
Yeah. I used to grow up in that place. Okay, great.
For real, when it would get really hot, we would just smell the river.
Oh God, it was awful.
So awful.
So then we enter chapter 1 and we immediately meet Ruelian Delara.
I definitely just read it as Ruellen.
Yeah.
I just dropped that
I think
I.
it's just the I does not exist.
Yeah, it does not exist. I think it's probably Ruelian. I don't like that. It's Ru.
Yeah, Ruelian is difficult for me to say. But fortunately, she has a nickname, Ru. So Ru is an archaeologist, and she's toiling at dig site 33 on the behalf of the Cornelian Tower, which is a university. We learned that Ru has a passion for discovering the lives of those who lived in Navany in ancient times, and she has a specialization in ancient pottery. She's joined at this dig site by her friend Archie Hill, and we learned that they both joined the tower when they were both 19, so they've been friends for a little bit now. They're in their early 20s.
I hate Archie.
Why do you hate Archie?
I don't know. He's okay, but there's a scene, I'm not even there yet, I should save it. But where he like speaks for her and kind of puts her down, but like she's like, oh, it's nice. And I'm like, no, it's fucking not.
Oh my gosh. We have to talk about this when we get there because I did not get that vibe at all.
I'm gonna pull it up, so continue, but that's what I'm gonna do. It's possible I misread it, but I was upset.
So we learn that Archie is a bit of a trust fund baby. He's an aristocrat trying to escape his family for reasons that we don't get details on. He's handsome and easygoing, and though the two, Ru and Archie, had tried it on romantically in the past, that had long since fizzled into purely friendship. At least for Ru. Ru does suspect that Archie still holds a torch. We learn that Ru has brown, unruly hair, brown eyes, and describes herself as average looking, which suits her just fine because academia is her passion.
I had the note that was like, Katie, how do you feel about this mousy woman that knows she's not particularly stunning?
I am so plain. How could anybody be interested in me? I'm just so horribly plain. Books are my only pleasure. Like, you can be both.
You can be both. And like she kind of brings it back where she's like, I don't give a shit that I'm plain, but I'm like, okay, but why did you tell me that you're plain then?
I just don't understand where the idea of her plainness comes from because like
she's not.
And that's really what I struggle with in most of these books. It's like, do you have somebody in your life saying like, God, you're so hard to look at? Like, or do you just have this built up in your own brain hole?
Yeah.
And it seems like for her, it's the latter. And like, look, I didn't particularly grow up with great self-esteem, but by the time I was in my like early 20s, I knew that I was hot. So like,
yeah, like I'm fairly confident that I am an attractive human. I'm not
Yeah.
just like, I am just so plain
blob.
with my brown. And also, why is it always a brunette? Why are only brunettes plain?
yeah, it's like if your eyes and your hair match, there's no way you can be interesting or attractive.
Which is just bullshit.
So we also learn here that for no apparent reason, we learn that there is a third member of their friend group, Gwyneth Tenoria, who's also from the ruling class, but she's not at the dig, and we don't meet her until fully halfway through the book, so I don't know why she's mentioned here.
We don't need to know. And again, why do we get last names for everyone? Also, why
Yeah.
does everyone have like really fancy last names and Archie is just Hill?
He's of the famous Hill family. They
Oh.
own every hill.
Every single hill in the land.
Every single one.
That's fine, but the land seems kind of flat to me.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I don't know. I feel like it's the vibe that this book is going for. It's very like turn of the century-esque.
Yeah.
It feels like it's going for kind of like that buttoned up like vibe.
prim and proper.
It doesn't quite land it.
No. Can't show my ankles.
No. Anyway, so Ru and Archie ruminate over a nearly intact pot that Ru has just unearthed, but they are interrupted by a pair of King's Riders. These guys are dressed in kind of formal uniform, armor. They've got like feathers on their head, like very official looking. And they're not usually seen around dig sites. And so everybody's kind of like, WTF? And they come up to the pair of them and they ask for Rue by name. They tell her that they've come on behalf of the regent Sigrun, specifically to bring her to a different dig site where her expertise is needed. She's been asked for by name.
Okay, so this is where I decided that I don't like Archie. And I'm sure he's a lovely man. But they kind of go back and forth where Rue's like, yeah, I'm this person, but like, why do you want me?
Like, who's asking?
Yeah, who's asking? And they're like, as I said, we got your name. Like, we're under orders to bring you. Like, can you just come with us?
I'm just doing my job.
Right, and that's the vibe I get from them is like, bitch, I don't know. Like, can you just come?
Right.
So we get this line. Sorry, said Archie, cutting through silence, but I'm convinced you've got the wrong Ruelian Delara, unless you need an expert on vases and vessels, which I can't imagine isn't readily available among the palace scholars. It just felt a little derogatory to me. Like, well, she just knows vases, and like plenty of people know about that.
That's a fair point. I think maybe I was just not reading that part too closely.
Well, and then the next line is like, Rue pursed her lips. Normally she hated when Archie spoke for her, but now she was grateful. And I was like, he just put down your whole education.
Right, your whole specialness.
Right. And so I was just like, because that's essentially what he says is like, you can't possibly want her because all she knows is vases, and there have to be plenty of those in the palace.
Right. Like, what's so special about her?
Yeah. And I was just like, Archie.
Yeah, that is kind of harsh. Wow.
Yeah, I just did not appreciate that. And like, that's the only thing he says that's questionable to me, but I didn't like it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I think it's also kind of, the thing about Archie that rubbed me the wrong way is this like kind of nebulous, kind of lingering feeling that he has for Rue. Yeah. That's never a good thing to not address.
No. I kind of got this vibe that he's like bitter about being in the friend zone and that it's going to cause problems at some point.
I definitely got the vibe that it's going to cause problems in the future. We're not there yet, so I don't know.
No, but it's a bit odd.
It's a bit odd.
They're all very strange to the King's Riders. Like, it struck me as they were all just a little rude. And I'm like, is this how you talk to... Okay. How I would talk to them. But...
Well, so Archie's one thing, but when we get to the like main tent with their other professors, that shit is bonkers.
Right? I'm just like... Does this king have any power over you? Like, why are you all being asses?
Well, like, and I kind of have this question for you. Like, is this anything like what academia is actually like? Because if it is, I can't imagine anybody wanting to be there.
It's not been my experience.
Yeah. So let's get there and we can talk about it a little bit more. So Archie says this thing. The King's Guards or the King's Riders clarify when pushed that yes, this is the correct Rue, daughter of Laurelian.
I don't like the eyes.
Daughter of Laurelian Delara. As a final push, they ask her to confirm that she's authored the paper titled, quote, From Sorcery to Science, a study of particle matter dilation, the transformation of one substance to another, and the transfer of energy between invisible lines, an argument in favor of the existence of magic.
Which is a long-ass title.
It's a long-ass title. It's a proper, like, academic paper title.
It is a proper academic paper title. And also what we're talking about here is alchemy.
Right. Rue is mortified because the paper is something that she is at once most proud of, but most embarrassed by because it was so poorly received by just about everybody in the academic world because she's talking about magic.
We don't believe in magic. We believe in science.
Rue eventually is like, okay, fine, I'll go with you, but this better not be an extremely elaborate ruse to make me look stupid. And I'm like, okay, girl.
I had that question too where I'm like, okay, you don't think you're special. Archie clearly doesn't think you're special. Why do you think you're that special that someone would go through this much work?
Yeah, so she has this kind of like assumed persona of like, oh, I'm just this academic mouse, like nobly blah blah, like would care about me. But then she consistently acts contrary to that. Like this is one, and then later on she'll like get places and she's like, why is nobody coming to see me? And I'm like,
Who are you?
Okay.
She's oddly entitled.
Right. So they go to the main tents of the dig, and there the professors and the other students gawk and ridicule the spectacle of like these writers coming to get Rue. They've all sussed out why Rue is being summoned, specifically about this paper, and they're all just like heckling and like academically catcalling, and like it's just very bizarre.
So, like, I will say the speed of gossip is accurate, and like deducing that, like, well, this thing was a problem, so obviously it's about that. But the blatant heckling I've never experienced. It's much more like behind closed doors. Like, the gossip is rampant, but again, this is also where I feel like it's weird. Like, you have the king's guards here, and you're just gonna mock what they're doing? Like, it's just so strange.
Right. It's the definition of shooting the messenger.
Yeah. No, so I've never experienced that, thank God, because I would not be in academia, because that would be stressful and upsetting. Also, don't you guys have jobs to do? Why are you just, like, shooting the shit?
Well, it feels like there's so many people here. Like,
so many people here.
Like, easily more than 10 people. And I'm like, why are there so many professors and students around? Like, this should be, like, maybe 5, right?
Well, that was the other thing, too, that I was wondering with, like, the tower and the dig sites, where I'm like, okay, you're students, but you're also, like, kind of an expert in your field. Like, I don't really understand, like, the educational structure of what's happening.
No. And that comes up for me later, because when we get back to the tower later on in the book, she mentions that she's like a 4th year, and I'm like, are you trying to graduate, or have you just spent 4 years studying there? Like, I don't understand what you're trying to achieve. Like, is it a degree system?
Yeah. Or is it like an apprenticeship?
Right. Like you're going into the profession of being an academic. That's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, that is kind of what it feels like. But I had a lot of questions about.
Yeah. So anyway, in the chaos, Rue slips away with the writers quietly, and she ends up waving a melancholy goodbye to Archie. The writers take far too long to take her to the Shattered City.
It takes such a long time.
Yeah, so it's described as being a day's ride away, and to the author's credit, she does faithfully stick to that timeline. Like, they leave in the afternoon, they don't arrive until the following afternoon, that kind of thing. But it's a painful process. Like, we are with them the whole time.
The whole time. And, like, through the boredom and the tiredness that they experience, like, every fucking meal.
Like, I don't need to be here. I don't want to be here.
And we don't learn anything. Like, basically, they're just riding this horse, and, like, we don't get information. They're just riding their horses.
The most information we get is the names of the writers, which I didn't note here because I didn't know if they were going to be important. It didn't strike me like this was going to be a permanent installation of this plot.
Yeah.
But alas, they are. So I guess I should introduce the writers.
Please do, because I don't know their names.
So we have 3 writers that are accompanying Rue. The leader of the pack, her name is Sibith. And she's kind of a tough cookie, so she's definitely in charge. I don't know what kind of rank she has, but she continues to be in charge of at least these 2 chucklefucks for the remainder of the book. We have a gentleman named Lear, who is kind of a beige crayon. And then we have Rosala, who is more junior, right? She's warmer toward Rue. She shares candies with Rue by throwing them at her face for some reason.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up.
Yep.
They just like bounce off her nose, and apparently they bond over that. I would be pissed. We've been on horses for 12 hours. Don't throw candy at my face.
Why are you throwing candy at my face?
You're not even
bitch?
sharing. You're just hitting me with candy.
Right. So yeah, these guys take her to the Shattered City, the namesake of the series, and this is the city from the prologue that was obliterated, and this is apparently where this dig site is.
This was also strange. Like, there's a lot of conversations that happen that feel like not red herrings, but just feel confusing. So, like, we'll talk about her reaction to the Shattered City, but one of the guards says, like, oh, have you never seen it before? And Rue's like, no, it's illegal to come here. And I'm like, then why would they ask that question?
Right. I had that same thought when she was talking about the setting, because she says that the sun is high, it's hot, and then at some point she describes being cold, and I'm like, why are you cold? I thought it was a desert.
Right, and like, is it like a desert where it gets like freezing at night and hot during the day? Because that's a thing, but I don't know where you are.
Yeah, it was very contradictory. So, like Liz said, it's the first time that Rue has ever been to the Shattered City, because you have to get a special dispensation from the regent to do so. It's illegal otherwise. As they near the site, Rue feels something well within her, almost like a sentient thing pulling her toward the crater where the old city used to be. The pull is so strong that it overtakes her senses, demands that she get to the city center faster, and it only releases her from its thrall when she obeys and urges the horse to gallop forward.
This scene was just funny to me because, like, she's mid-conversation feeling all of these, like, uncomfortable feelings and just, like, bolts away from the group, like, into the city.
And the guards are just like, don't fuck. Okay.
Like, all right, I guess we're going to follow you this time.
Yeah.
But you don't know where you're going.
So they get to the dig, and the guards tell Rue that it's not a towered sanctioned dig. Very few people know that it exists. And for that reason, the riders that she came with can, like, basically water their horses and, like, eat, and then they gotta go. Like, they can't stick around. We're also introduced to a character named Lady Marin, who seems to be in charge, and she welcomes Rue and ushers her through the site. She immediately is taken to a spot where other researchers kind of mill around and introduce themselves to her, buzzing with nervousness. And they show her what they've found. So she's been brought here to inspect something that they've uncovered in this dig. And it ends up being a small rock-like thing in the center of a hole where they dug it up. This is the thing that called to Rue. She can feel it now that she's closer to it. And she knew everything from her life before brought her to that specific moment, to this thing.
I think as we're talking about this, I'm noticing things that I think made it feel that, like, kind of weird, a little off kilter. So there's these things that I don't think are intended to be funny, but they are funny. So way back when she was at dig site 33 and they're, like, walking to wherever the professors are, Archie, like, mentions one of their co-students that specializes in, like, ancient toilets or something.
Yeah.
And then this, like, they're essentially just like, hey, we found this rock. And then later when she's with Fen, he's like, I'm not going to hurt your rock. Like, they just refer to it as, like, she just has this rock. Like, this is my pet rock. And I must care for it.
Right.
And so I got, like, vague, what's the name of that book? Nettle and Bone vibes were like, it's a serious story, but we got this, like, tongue-in-cheek thing going on. And I don't think that's intended, but
yeah,
that's just how I felt.
No, I'm with you. And I feel like that very much with I can't tell if this book is taking itself seriously or not, because, like, she goes into this tent, right? And it's like a tent over a dig, right? Where they found this thing. And there's, like, a bunch of motherfuckers in here, right?
Again.
And they're all just kind of, like, standing around, and then they start introducing themselves to Rue. They're like, oh yes, pish posh, lovely to see you, good of you to come, like, all of that kind of stuff. And then Lady Marin's like, yeah, stop with the pleasantries, like, she's got to look at the rock. And I'm like, this can't be real life.
Right? Like, it's just and that I think is what's weird to me. It's like, I don't know if you're taking yourself seriously. And it makes me feel a little odd.
Because, like, in that scene, it could have just been, like, nobody was in the tent. Like,
yeah, or, like, one guy who, like, found it and now has some, like, weird reaction. It's like, I found this rock.
Right, or his hand burned off. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, because we also don't get a sense of, like, why they're so weird around it. Not yet. It's just like,
no. Well, and even then, we don't get a sense of, like, what they're all doing. Like, it's just, there's a lot of questions to this whole thing.
Not enough answers.
Yeah. So Lady Marin, so Rue's like staring at this rock, right? And so Lady Marin kind of clears her throat and she's like, so you think it's magic? And Rue's like, what do you think? Like, why are you asking that question? And Lady Marin says that it made all of their tech go haywire. But once Rue showed up, that stopped. And we learn kind of later that their tech are like watches.
That was another thing that I was confused. I was like, okay, so is this like a steampunky thing? Like you have tech, but we're also set back? No, they just
Pocket watches.
Yeah, where I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Is that tech?
Okay, that's what we're gonna label these things. You couldn't have just said all of our watches went haywire. Like, okay.
Right, because it's not like they're using like power drills or even like we don't get a lot of like electric lighting. Like, so
no.
Sonar into the ground. Like, what tech? Your
Sensors.
Watches? Yeah,
nothing.
no, just.
It's very like 19 teens.
Yes.
Like Egyptian dig sites.
That's what I'm picturing in my head. But then there's just like these weird little offshoots. Like the word tech. And I'm like,
The word tech. That's what it's referred to as in the book. Their tech went haywire. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Like, that's okay. Okay.
So Rue asks if anything else weird has happened. She's like fishing to see if she's the only one that can talk to the rock. And Lady Marin confirms that like nothing else weird has happened. So Rue's like, okay, cool. So it's just me that has this emotional connection to a stone. Got it.
Awesome.
So Lady Marin's like, great. You saw the rock. You think it's magic. Now you can rest. You have an hour for a nap. You have an hour to eat. And then we will come back and you will inspect the rock more.
You stare at the rock in the hole.
Yeah. So Lady Marin kind of shows her to a tent that she's been allocated. And as she does so, she tells her that they were ordered to dig there. And it's likely no coincidence that this thing was found at the very epicenter of the crater of the shattered city. But she doesn't let on very much more. It's clearly a regent-funded site. It's very secretive. Rue has a lot of questions, as do I. So they have lunch, and then Rue is given an hour to take a nap. But she's restless. She still feels this thing calling to her, and she doesn't know how to feel about it. And this is when I call out that, like, there are a number of different things about this book that feel, I'm not going to say juvenile in, like, the, like, typical sense, but just, like, young, like, writer-wise, because the author repeats herself about mechanics a lot. So, like, in this nap scene in particular, Rue bolted out of bed, then she lay back twice, then she braided her hair twice, then she got to her feet, and then she was sitting again, and it's just like, you could have made this entire scene about how she's feeling about the artifact half as long.
And far more effective.
And I don't need to know about these mechanics, right? It's like, oftentimes, like, you'll get the feedback, or you should go through this, like, exercise of, like, as an author, you tend to want to describe every single thing that's happening in the room to make extra sure that your readers are understanding what's happening. You don't need to do that.
No. It's like she got the feedback of show, don't tell, and she was like, okay, so show everything. Got it.
Right.
Like, okay, but no.
That's a little much. Like, I would prefer this. I do prefer this over, like, a tell.
Yes.
For sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But it is a lot. So Rue is taken back to the object to inspect it, and only Lady Marin is present, which is why I have questions about those other people that were present.
And where are they now? Did they get dismissed?
Right. Well, they're all about to be dead, so...
True. Listen, here. She doesn't know that.
So Rue insists on touching this thing, this artifact, with her bare hands, despite Lady Marin's protests. And when she does so, everything goes black for a moment, then bright white for a moment, and then goes dark again.
Oops.
And Rue passes out.
I don't know why you thought this was a good idea, but okay.
Right. So when Rue wakes up, she's alone, and it's completely dark, and she is completely naked. She has the rock, which we will now be referring to interchangeably as the artifact. And She's like stumbling around for a bit, and eventually she is met with a man, though we don't immediately know that it's a man for some reason. I think that's just an oversight.
Yeah.
But
Odd.
it's like fully a page and a half of this interaction, and we have no idea the gender of this person.
No. For no reason. Like, it's not obscured for a particular... It's not like a reveal that's a man.
Right. It's not like he has they, them pronouns. Like, it's not intentional.
No. It's just odd.
It's just a miss. So he ends up giving her a cloak and telling her that she is alone, that there are no tents and no researchers, and it's clear that whatever has happened has annihilated the dig site, and everybody else has blinded Rue, either temporarily or permanently, and left her alone with this artifact.
And this strange man.
Yeah, this strange man.
Where'd you come from, bro?
Where did you come from? We still don't know.
No, we still don't know, which is suspicious. And I don't think she asks enough questions.
She does not ask enough questions, for sure. But this man is kind and gives her a set of his clothes, offers to tell her what he knows if she'll allow him to take her away from the shattered city. It gives him bad juju. And Rue agrees. She feels a strange sense of comfort and rightness with this person. And it's the same kind of feeling that she feels with the stone that she's clutching to her chest like a crazy person.
I'm hoping because he made it.
I'm hoping because he made it too.
I do just picture her like holding her pet rock.
Yeah, and I'm picturing it having very poorly drawn on eyes and mouth.
Yes, or like little googly eyes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yes. So the man leads her to where his horse is and gently helps her up so that they can both ride out of this area. He tells her that her blindness will pass and that she should hold on to the pommel of the saddle in front of her in the meantime.
How does he know that?
How does he know that the blindness will pass? We don't know.
We don't know.
She asks him for answers once, but he demurs until they are safe, which in his eyes means that they are much further from this cursed place.
And she just accepts that. She's like, okay.
He just accepts that at face value. She's like, why do you think that? No follow-up questions.
Great.
Okay.
All right.
He does share that he fears that what happened to Rue may happen again for some reason, but he doesn't elaborate. So they continue riding for a while, and as they do, Rue's sight does indeed return. By the time they stop for camp near the main road, so I'd hazard a guess they're much further away from the cursed city, she can make out entire shapes. This man, we learn his name is Fen, leaves her on her own while he gathers wood or some shit, and then Rue starts having a panic attack about what's happened to her. So she's alone with her thoughts and her feelings. The warm and fuzzies have not kept with her, and so her adrenaline is crashing down around her, and she starts to panic.
And then she's ostensibly just murdered like 20 people.
Yeah.
Which she also doesn't mention for a while.
Yeah, it doesn't really confront. That's fine.
It kind of comes up in her inner monologue like, why would he like me? I'm a murderer.
Right.
And that's it.
Once.
One time.
But Fen comes back and comforts her. He tells her that she's safe and he won't let anything happen to her. And this is where I'm like, I really want this to be the destroyer from the beginning.
Yes.
That would be great.
I think it's here. It might be later, but where he says the line of like, I won't let anything happen to you or your rock.
Yes.
And he says the word rock. Like
he does. And it's not here, but it's like later because she starts getting like cagey.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
like, does he want my rock?
My
Is he gonna
precious.
take my rock? My precious.
Does he want my rock?
When the panic attack subsides, Rue realizes her vision has completely returned and she can see Fen for the first time. He is described as having, quote, dark hair like a winter sky before snow and framed with dark lashes, unruly black hair over his forehead curling just below his ears, his features refined and elegant yet rough around the edges, a regal arched nose that... A regal nose arches gracefully... A regal arch.
It's just better because you're keeping it a regal. It's like a breathy voice every time you restart. It's so good.
Okay. Ooh.
Oh my god.
A regal arched nose. Nope. Okay.
Okay.
Ooh. A regal nose arches gracefully. Nope. Fucking hate this. brain
Do you want me to try to say it?
A regal nose arches gracefully down to a pair of well-shaped lips, curved into a slight smile with stubble peppering his angular jaw. End quote.
Well done.
Thank you and good night.
And that's where we're going to end this part.
That's where we're going to end part 1, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, we'll see ya.
We'll see ya. Bye.
Oh my God.
Oh, Jesus. He sounds
anyway,
lovely.
The subtext here is he's fine.
He's fine as fuck.
He's fine. And for some reason, he's enamored of this plain academic nobody mouse.
Gee, I wonder why.
I know. So they sit next to the fire in their camp and talk over a meal that Fenn brought with him. He tells Rue that he's the son of a marquis, but doesn't say from where, and that he grew up reading books and being curious about the destruction, and that one day he woke up knowing that he had to see it, so he just went. And to Rue, this sounds a lot like the pull that she fell from the stone. And to me, this sounds like a bunch of horse shit.
Sounds
but
like a
she asks no questions.
No.
Yeah.
She takes a lot of this at face value. It sounds like a bunch of horseshit to me, too.
Yeah. He goes on to say that when he arrived, he saw something like the destruction that was originally described decimating the city of Ordellan by the sea. And he confirms that Rue, by touching the stone she hasn't stopped clutching, eliminated the dig site and its inhabitants around her.
Whoops.
Rue reacts badly to this news. She gets up from the spot that she's sitting, walks directly into the forest to get some alone time, ? I don't know. She's torn, wanting the artifact destroyed, but also never wanting to be parted from it ever again, like a precious.
My precious.
And she immediately gets attacked by a wolf.
This is one of those scenes where I'm just like, why?
What are we doing?
Why are we here right now? I did have a brief, I'm not right. I don't think I'm right. But I had a brief query as to if when she touched the stone, if she really decimated everything or if she like time traveled.
Oh, that's interesting.
Back to like when it first happened.
Yeah, I did have that thought of whether she teleported those people away.
Ooh. There's
Something similar.
magic, something like that.
Yeah, I'm
bodies.
very interested to see like how that resolves itself.
Yeah, I still have a lot of questions about that. But this wolf, what the fuck?
Yeah, this wolf kind of comes out of nowhere, and this is a good example of scene in this book that tries to like inject action into something that it doesn't need to be there. Like, there's already been a whole bunch of action. Like, this action serves no purpose.
No.
Except to have a really weird interaction between Rue and Fenn.
Yeah, and I think it's trying to establish some intimacy, but it's just weird.
Yeah, it's far too soon, too.
Yeah.
And so this scene and its placement and its mechanics is awkward. It's made even more awkward by weird phrasing in it. So I pulled out one. There's a bit of weird phrasing as Rue and this wolf are fighting. It says, quote, "It's slavered, it's drool landing on her neck." And like, yes, slavered is technically a word. It feels like you're writing in Shakespeare.
Yeah, like it is the correct word and you used it correctly, but I feel like you can't use the word slavered and tech in the same book.
No.
It's just odd.
Yeah, like it drooled, right?
Yeah.
Some saliva landing on her neck. Like it was clunky. In an already clunky scene, it just stuck out like a sore thumb. Yeah. So Rue struggles with this thing and the artifact rolls away in the mayhem. But of course, Fenn saves Rue. He kills the beast, and he's got a really weird reaction. He turns to Rue and says, quote, "Are you safe?" he said. His voice was hoarse, almost desperate. "Are you hurt? Did it harm you? Are you bleeding?" And I'm like, whoa.
Whoa, like everything's okay. It's an intense response.
It is an intense response. And even Rue is taken aback. She's like, I mean, I'm fine.
I'm okay.
Right? Like, I'm totally fine.
I'm a little out of breath, but like I'm good.
But she goes on to say that if she wants to run into the forest and get attacked by a wolf, it's none of his business.
I mean, weird flex, I guess.
Yeah. And this is when he says something like, "I will never let like harm come to the rock," or something. Like,
Yeah.
something weird.
Yeah, it's something.
And he like hands the rock back to her.
Yeah, because she dropped it. But she does her weird my precious-y thing and is like, don't touch my rock. And he's like,
Right, because she snatches it back, and I have this note. I'm like, that's rude. I don't like that.
I know, like he was handing it to you.
Right.
And yeah, and this is when he does the whole like, I'll never let anything happen to you or your rock. I'm like, oh, you don't know her or her rock, or do you?
No. Oh, it could have been. Oh my gosh, it could be too that she traveled back in time, met him, and then he knew to come pick her up.
That's what I'm wondering.
Oh.
Because that would be cool.
That would be cool. Okay. Anyway, when they get back to camp, Fen tells Rue to stow the artifact away because he's got a bad feeling about it.
Also, you're creepy with it.
Yeah, you're being real creepy. And he gives her a cloth to wrap it in. Rue is paranoid that he knows about the rock and that it's the thing that caused the destruction and that he's going to take it away. And he's like, again, if I wanted to steal your rock, I would have. I'm not going to let anything happen to you or your rock. I'd rather die first. And I'm like, you're laying it on a little thick, dude, no?
That was a lot. He has a point where, like, when I found you, like, naked and unconscious, I could have taken it then. But he does lay it on a little thick. Like, okay.
Yeah. So then he insists on tending to Rue's wounds, which Rue begrudgingly allows.
This was another spot where I was like, is this tongue-in-cheek or do I just think it's funny? Because he says, like, I need to tend to your knees, they're bleeding. And the line from the author is even like, she looked down as if she just realized she had knees.
Yeah.
and she says something like, why are they bleeding? He's like, oh, you fell when you were blind. And I'm like, the fuck is this conversation?
I know. I clocked that the first time she had knees. Like, Lion and I laughed at that too. And that's why I'm like, this book has to be self-sentient at some point.
It has to be, because it is just, there's too many things like that where I'm just like, wait a minute. What?
Yeah.
And I'm here for
but
it.
Then
I'm just confused.
But then there's other parts that take themselves far too seriously, and I'm like, you can't do both.
Like using the word slavered. I'm like, that wasn't tongue-in-cheek.
Right. Literally.
First some shit.
So it's here that it strikes me that these two are in a free fall of plot right now. Because, like, let's see. For context, I have a page and a half, 2 pages left of part 1, which means that we are a third of the way through this book. I have no idea what we're doing.
She got a rock and maybe murdered people. Unknown.
Unknown.
I don't know. She doesn't know either. I don't know.
Anyway, so he's cleaning her wounds, and she can't shake the feeling of familiarity that she has toward him and has had toward him since they met. She asks if they've met before, but he says no. Though he confirms that, like, I feel the same way. I feel like I've met you before. She tells him that she wants to go back to the tower to take this thing and research it. And he says they should rest for the rest of the day before they go anywhere because, like, you're in bad shape and we can't move very quickly.
You're a problem.
Right. And it's in this scene that I can't help but wonder, or can't help but think that she should be acting a little bit more like she's on the run because she just killed a bunch of royal people at a dig site that we're not even really sure, like, who all was there. Someone's gonna notice at some point.
Yeah. They're just very nonchalant about, like, their next steps.
Right. And she's like, well, I'm gonna go back to the tower to study this artifact. And I'm like, girl, people are gonna ask questions.
Yeah, especially your entire cohort that just saw you be taken by, like, soldiers, essentially. And you're just gonna come back with a rock?
With googly eyes on it? Like,
right, that, like, you're weirdly possessive over and this rando dude that no one knows.
Right.
And anyone at that dig site is just missing.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. And I want to know, like, I realize it's like a secret dig site, but there have to be people that know people were there.
Yes.
Right? Who ordered that?
Right.
Like, they have to know.
Well, and, like, this is just such a foreign concept to me because if I accidentally killed a bunch of people, I would for sure be anxious as fuck that I would be getting in trouble.
100%. And she literally has, like, one fleeting thought that is related to Fen in that, like, he can't like me because I'm a murderer.
Right.
That's her only concern.
It's almost like it's like related to that ignorance is not a defense, like, kind of thing. Yes. But it's almost like she has this ignorance is a valid defense. She's like, well, I didn't know that was going to happen, and I didn't mean to do it, so I can't be held responsible for it. I'm like, that's not how that works.
That's definitely not how that works. It's not how it works at all. And there's no proof I did it, I guess, so therefore, girl, no.
Okay, there was no proof, and then they immediately cop to it when they're asked about it.
I know!
Like, whoa, okay.
And, like, I can't even...
Okay.
It's wild.
So that's about to happen, but we'll get there. So they end up talking more, and Rue tells Fen that her father is a textile merchant who she rarely sees, and her mother died when she was young. She has a brother, Simon, who lives in the capital, Mirith, and has rooms at the palace, but they aren't nobility. She lives and studies at the Cornelian Tower. And Fen has this great line. He's like, that's great, but I asked about you.
Yep. Which I appreciate.
She goes on to say that she's an archaeologist studying pottery, but she used to study magic as her first passion, and that's why the regent summoned her to the destruction.
I got big vibes of, like, tell me what your hobbies are, like, in an interview, and suddenly it's like, I have only ever watched paint dry. Right. And she has no idea what to say.
Exactly. Relatable.
Yes.
Tell me about yourself. I'm going to tell you about everybody but me.
Exactly. Like, I have this great friend and I have a brother, and, like, here's my whole family tree. Did I mention my name? No? Good.
Good. Yeah. So I've picked out another example of why the writing style of this book feels so odd, so I'm going to read it to you. Rue, said Fen, starting to get to his feet. Don't, she said, shaking her head. I'm fine. I'm just tired. You need rest, he said, sitting down again. I've pushed you too hard. Wait there. He stood and went to the saddlebag, pulling a bedroll from within. In a few long-legged strides, he crossed the small clearing, settling the bedroll in a patch of shaded grass. When it was laid out, its wrinkles smoothed, he turned to Rue. There's far too much detail here.
No, like, why is he rising and sitting and rising, and then it takes a couple steps and...
The mechanics are just weird. Like, it's all jumbled together. Like, he sits, he stands, he sits, he stands, he's walking, he's, like, rolling out the bedroll. We don't need to know that.
No, I don't need to know that. Like, you could have that whole thing and just say, like, Rue, don't. You're tired. I'm gonna get the bedroll. Once it was rolled out, she laid down. Like,
you could even say once he rolled it out and smoothed out the wrinkles for her. Like, if you wanted to show that act of service, you could do that in a much more cohesive way.
But the rising and sitting and rising was so strange.
Yeah, and that's not the only example. Like, this is probably at this point, by the time I got fed up enough to, like, transcribe this whole passage, probably the 4th or 5th time that something like this happened.
Yeah, it's weird. And it's just weird. And that does feel, like, you used the word juvenile before, it does feel like a new author.
Like a rookie mistake.
Yeah.
So the next day, they ride toward the tower, and Rue asks Fen why he's sticking around. You know, he doesn't really have a reason to. He could have just abandoned her. And he says, no, I couldn't have abandoned you. Like, that's, like, I'm a decent person. And she kind of scoffs at that notion. And he concedes, you know, it's a good point. Strange men, until proven otherwise, should be always considered monsters. And I really like that line.
I really like that line. And I love that line coming from a man.
Yeah, same. Very self-aware.
Yes.
So he doesn't really give her a better answer to that, other than to put the rest of his gender down. But to pass the time, he tells her of his other travels. And Rue has the thought that he's packed an awful lot of life into his years, because he doesn't seem to be much older than her. Probably late 20s, maybe early 30s at the oldest.
I think he's much older.
Unless he's been 19 for a while.
Oh. That's what I'm thinking.
So they go on to talk about the stone, and Rue feels comfortable opening up about her suspicions about it after Fen assures her that if he wanted to take it from her, he would have by now. That, coupled with his admission that he also believes in magic, puts Rue at ease and feeling like she can confide in a kindred spirit. Later in the day, they're met by King's riders on the road, and Rue recognizes them as the same ones who ferried her to the site at the destruction originally, so Sibith, Lear, and Rosella. They tell her that the region was informed of what happened at the dig site by a fisherman offshore.
How?
So they're riding to inspect it.
Did they see like another poom of black? And this fisherman's just like,
also,
hey guys.
This fisherman's such a narc. Mind your own business.
Right. Don't you have fish to catch?
God. And did the fisherman write directly to the regent like, hey, girl?
Hey, girl, I saw this weird thing. And that's the other thing. Like, I don't understand communication in this book because they haven't been traveling that long. If communication can happen that fast, then it just seems so weird. Like, the guy's offshore. How did he get to shore and then get a message by what I can only assume is carrier pigeon to the regent?
Right. I have questions how we got from a fisherman to the regent so fast.
Yeah. Faster than they are on land.
Because she doesn't, when we meet the regent, she doesn't strike me as the type of woman who reads her fan mail, you know?
No. And I can't imagine that, like, this rando letter from some rando fisherman is just going to be like, oh, madame, you must read this at once.
This is really important, I promise.
Get it.
But regardless, they're there. And so they obviously recognize Rue and they're like, hey, what happened? And Fen and Rue cop immediately to being a witness.
I murdered all these people.
Of what happened at the dig site.
Whoops.
And then they lie by saying that they were on their way to Mirith to report it. They were like, yeah, we were on our way to y'all to
tell
report
you
what was going to happen. Yeah. Rue truthfully tells what happens and then blunders that she still has the artifact with her that ostensibly caused the explosion. And the guards kind of freak out. They're like, oh, shit. Like,
we got to go.
Okay. They're like, all right, well, y'all have to come with us to the capital. And so Rue and Fen kind of have this moment of like, I guess we have to do this now. And so they go with them.
Also, no one questions Fen, like why he's here. Like the guards couldn't even stay at the dig site longer than like watering their horses. But she shows up with this rando. I mean, I guess they don't know who was there, so he could have just already been there. But like, what?
They don't ask enough questions about Fen.
No one does.
Well, and I would love for that to be explained as like he's got like this Jedi mind trick. Like these aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the breasts you're looking for.
Yeah, but we don't know this point.
Yeah.
So they go to Mirith, which was the capital of Navani after the destruction of Ordellan by the sea. Rue loves it, and Fen can plainly see that, and she tells him that it's because she grew up there. When she asks if he has a similar place that he calls home, he tells her not anymore, and end of conversation.
Because it was Ordellan by the sea.
Whoops.
Is what I think.
Yep. So they arrive at the palace, and they're given time to bathe and make themselves presentable, basically, before meeting with the regent. And when Rue is finished bathing, she gets a look at herself in the mirror and realizes how gaunt she looks. She's got like these huge purple bags under her bloodshot eyes. Her skin is like pale and like wan looking. And it's clear that the events of the last couple of days have taken a toll on her, and she cringes internally that this is how Fen found her. She's just like, great.
He also found you naked, so I'm sure you wasn't looking at the bags under your eyes.
Nope. But the attendant, Pearl, does a good job making Rue look beautiful, and she is very grateful. It bolsters her confidence.
She was so ugly.
I'm so plain and so hideous. No one would ever love me. Sibith comes to collect Rue and scolds both Fen and Rue for wasting time after staring at each other for like a full 5 minutes in the hallway. She's like, you have an appointment with the regent. Can you like wrap this up?
Places to go, things to see.
Right.
People to do.
People to do. So they're both shown into the throne room and every eye is upon them. Rue notices that there seem to be some religious people there. They're dressed in white, but she doesn't recognize the sect they're from. She hopes to catch a glimpse of her brother, Simon, but there's too many people. We learn that Regent Sigrun was the late king's wife, and that she is ruling the nation in lieu of a blood heir for the king because apparently none have shown up and they didn't have any children.
The no one showed up line also made me laugh. We're just like...
Yeah, because they're like, oh, she's ruling in place of a blood heir if one was ever going to turn up.
Like, do you not have family trees? Like...
How do you not know?
Like, wouldn't you know if the king had siblings?
What's the end game here?
I don't know. And now she's alone. Is she gonna remarry? Like, what happens when she dies?
Yeah.
I mean, I love a ruling queen,
all great
but
questions.
Like, you gotta have a plan.
Yeah. The regent is pretty impressive sounding. She is described as, quote, looking more like a general dressed in military attire with cream, skin-tight breeches, knee-high calfskin boots, a jacket of deep red practically bursting with gold buttons and tassels, and a large feathered hat perched on her graying hair. The woman herself was tall, her long legs crossed at the ankle, one long, large knuckle finger tapping the arm of the chair, and her features elegant and slightly masculine. Her nose reminded Rue of a marble statue. So, like, very imposing. Yes. And strong featured, which I liked.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. They're introduced, and Fen reveals that he has a second name, Veril. So Fen Veril. The regent asks for a first-hand account of what happened to Rue, and Rue tells her truthfully, except for the part about hearing feeling connected to this rock. She leaves that out.
To my pet rock.
Yeah. The regent is displeased that there's not a more concrete answer as to what happened, and Rue asks to be allowed to take the artifact to the Cornelian Tower to study it further, arguing that those facilities are better suited to the task. So the regent at first disagrees with this plan, but one of those religious-looking people dressed in white, he's kind of a tall, ethereal-looking man, leans forward and whispers something in the regent's ear that changes her mind. She reluctantly agrees to the plan, but stipulates that Rue and Fen must dine with her before leaving in the morning. Rue is shown out and absently wonders about the people in white who bent the regent's ear and thinks her brother Simon might know more. So when she gets back to her room, she asks Pearl to summon him. We learned that Simon is a minstrel, and we learned that minstrels in this world are, quote, one of the most culturally revered and sought-after people in the court and also one of the most endangered. Which is a weird way to say that minstrels have a lot of secrets. They drop their eaves a lot.
It is a weird way to say that. Also, I just had big, like, toss a coin to your Witcher vibes.
Yeah, kind of that. And I don't... Also, endangered makes it seem like there's few of them. I don't think that's the case.
No, I think they're, like, in danger, not, like, going extinct.
Right, exactly.
But it was a weird word to use.
It's a weird... It has weird connotations for that particular
Yeah, like,
thing.
he's not a panda.
He's not a panda, but he also, like, the way that she says that and the way that she describes a couple of other things, it's almost like he has a little bit of magic to him, and I wonder if that's actually going to be a thing.
Yeah.
Because he's, like, freakishly good at what he does.
Yeah, he kind of gives me, like, trickster vibes.
Very much. Yeah. Very much.
Which I'm here for.
So Simon comes to her room and he's delighted to see her. He asks about the artifact and why she's there, and she tells him the whole thing. Then she asks him about the people in white. He agrees to tell her as long as she'll provide more information on Fen, but Rue deflects, saying that there's not much to tell besides the fact that, like, he was there, helped her get to the capital, but, like, it's not like he's going to stick around and go to the tower with her or anything, because why would he?
All right.
Okay. So Simon tells her that the people in white are called the Children, and they claim to be a spiritual group from Mechia.
My head said Mensa every time. I don't know why.
Yeah. I wanted to say Mecca, but it's like Mekya.
Yeah, I think Mechia. Yeah.
I think. But this is one of those places, I don't know if it's in Navani or not. I don't know if it's another city. Like, I have no concept for, like, why this place is so foreign.
Yeah, what that is, why they're here.
Yeah. But Simon is very skeptical about them and where they purport to come from. He says that they have ties to a lot of goings-on in the castle and are very secretive. They appeared seemingly out of nowhere only a couple of months ago, and their leader is a man called Hugon, and he's become one of the regent's advisors. So he was the guy that kind of leaned over and whispered in her ear in that audience earlier. He also reveals that the regent didn't give a rat's ass about the destruction dig until the children showed up, and that's when she decided to fund the dig herself.
Which also makes me wonder if Hugon has some of that "these aren't the droids you're looking for" power.
100%. Simon ends the conversation by posing the question to Rue of why they immediately thought magic when they found this artifact, right? How did Hugon know about Rue's paper? How did they know where to dig? Where did they dig it up? Where did they dig her paper up? How does she fit into all of this? All of these questions that Rue just kind of drove by and took at face value.
Yeah, he asks the right questions.
He does ask the good questions. But we don't get any answers, and he just leaves.
And she doesn't seem concerned either still.
No, she doesn't take that as a red flag. She's just like, yeah, you talk too much.
He's like, that's weird, I guess.
Yep. So at dinner later that evening, Rue is seated at the right hand of the regent, but they don't actually talk very much, which Rue finds weird.
Yeah.
Fen is across from her, but the room is so loud and so boisterous that they can't actually like talk to each other over the table because they can't hear. Rue admits that he's at least nice to look at, and she keeps trying to get his attention to be like, hey, we should talk later privately, but she doesn't have any success. Every time that their eyes meet, he like determinedly looks away. And worse, he gets involved in a discussion with a pretty female to his right instead, and she's just like, well, fuck me.
Come on.
Right. And then she's thinking in her internal monologue, she's like, well, yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense. I don't know why I'm trying so hard. Like, he doesn't owe me anything.
Yeah, like, we didn't really, like, bond or anything.
No. Not to worry, though. A similar distraction finds Rue. An arrestingly beautiful man sits next to her and strikes up a conversation. He introduces himself as Lord DeLuc, and it's clear that he's read her paper, though he categorizes it as the occult, which makes Rue bristle a little bit. She's like, look, okay, not all occult is magic, and not all magic is occult. Like, get it right, Jesus.
Okay.
As she's talking to this man, Simon, of all people, kind of comes into her, like, field of vision and tries to give her a high sign, but it's completely lost on Rue as she continues to talk with this man.
Poor Simon.
And she even says, I'm so sorry, I was distracted by the minstrel. What were you saying?
The minstrel's your brother. He needs to tell you something.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not just there for your entertainment. I mean, he's there for everyone else's entertainment, but like, he's trying to tell you something.
Right, he's like making eyes at you. I'm like, it's like you've never spoken to this person before in your life.
Also, like, you were trying to communicate with Fen silently, but like, just fuck Simon, I guess.
Totally lost when it comes to you. So as she talks with DeLuc, Rue also realizes that she now has Fen's undivided attention, and he's clearly in turmoil over her being so attentive to DeLuc. But she keeps getting drawn back into the conversation with this guy. So she's kind of like in this, why I'm so popular.
I know, like,
why are you so obsessed with me?
Why are you so obsessed with me? I love it.
Ultimately, the regent draws the dinner to a close, and Rue notices Simon whispering fervently in Fen's ear, both of them looking seriously. And she's like, since when do they have secrets? Like, WTF.
Also, I don't understand why Simon can't just come over to Rue.
Or Fen.
Yeah, like, I like, this whole scene is weird, because like, he tries to get the high sign, that doesn't work. So he's like, I'm just gonna go talk to Fen instead. Like, you could walk around the table.
You could she could walk around the table to go talk to Fen.
Well, that's the thing too, because like, and clearly, it's just weird. Like, it's not like he's not allowed to approach the table. Like, he's just, it's just a weird scene again. I don't understand why it's so strange.
There's weird rules that I'm not following.
Yeah.
So she sees this happening, and she suddenly feels ill at ease, right? And DeLuc next to her notices, as does the regent. And the regent asks that DeLuc escort her back to her room. But when she does this, she addresses DeLuc by his first name, which turns out to be Hugon. It becomes apparent that this is Hugon, leader of the children, and Rue's just like, what?
Oh,
and she tries to, like, look for an exit. But when she looks back to Fen's seat for help, she finds that he's disappeared. So she doesn't have a choice. She has to go with DeLuc, and she feels all kinds of uncomfortable about it. And that, dear listeners, is where we're going to end part 1.
Oh, that's where I stopped reading, and I was like, what's going to happen? So I'm not reading further in your notes. I'm going to close it right now, because, like... And so that's where I'm interested in this story. I just keep getting bored, which is... Right. Not a fun push-pull. Like, I want to know what happens. I just don't want to slog through the exposition.
Right. Well, I think that's the point, right? So we read 140 pages. And essentially the only thing that happened was that we met our character. She went to one location. Something happened. We went to a second location, and she got her marching orders for ostensibly the rest of the plot.
Yeah.
We should be a little bit further along in the plot at this point.
Yeah, we should be. And I feel like really, I think that's the problem too, is that really not much has happened.
No. Yeah, there's a lot of exposition in between the couple of events that we got so far.
Yeah, and this could definitely have happened in 100 pages.
60 pages.
Yeah, easily. With just as much like detail. Or
yeah, I think
less
so.
detail, but more like meaningful detail.
Just as much information being given to us. One thing that I will say is that this book doesn't do an information dump.
Oh.
Which is such a weird combination, right? Because it's like we get so much exposition. It's too much exposition, but it's not like information dumping about the world. If anything, I have more questions about the world that I wish we got answers to earlier on.
Yes. That is what makes it so... There's a lot of things that make this book so weird because I want more information about the world, but that's also what keeps me intrigued in the book because I'm hoping we get those answers. Like it feels like it's setting up to explain that. Like it feels like those things are maybe being concealed on purpose. I hope that's true. But again, it makes me think of the Grapes of Wrath where we just have like these useless chapters that like aren't... I hated that book. I will always despise that book. I know you were there when I read that book. You have seen my disdain for this book for years, decades, actually. I don't know why I hate it so much. But it's just like, why?
Yeah. No, 100%. And I'm also interested from the point of like, you know, there's points of the story that I want to keep reading, but I'm interested to see if those qualms that we have or those like critiques of the writing style and how this book is edited ruin it for me, right? Or if the story is good enough that I can get past it.
Yeah. And because I'm not disliking it and I am curious.
No.
But I do see it going either way where it could be like, it was just too weird.
Yeah. Pro tip, skim a little bit. When there's big paragraphs, nope.
Because I'm clearly not missing anything.
No.
That makes me feel better because I was trying to be diligent and I was just like, I
can't.
Like this sounds terrible, but like I was starting to read it at night because I knew I would fall asleep.
Yeah.
And that's not great praise for a book. Like usually I couldn't have done that with Dark One. Like I was not falling asleep in that book.
No. 100%. All right, guys, that is part 1 of The Destroyer by Meg Smitherman. Stay tuned for parts 2 and 3 in 2 and 4 weeks, respectively. But until next time, we'll see ya. Bye.
Bye.